have an unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Osborne, and you're listening.
This is Sitchin and Sumerian, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
That's right. Welcome back to another fascinating episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I am your humble host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Angels, reaching all the way to Florida. And from there, we are going to New York, all the way back to Oregon and Washington. And from, let's take it one step further. We'll cross the Atlantic Ocean and go to London, where Johnny Webb is. And on the West Coast, I will go to past the Pacific Ocean and go to, of course, where Hawaii is, not to mention South Korea, Japan, and everywhere else where people are calling in from or asking questions, such as every place in the EU. I think almost every single country in the EU and UK, and even non-EU countries, have asked us questions, such as we've gotten things from Ukraine and even Moscow, which is really cool because I'm trying to get Putin on. With that being said, it is now officially 7:01 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 10:01 should I say, and 3 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, where Johnny Webb happens to be. Right as Donald Trump gets ready to go on stage, we are in for a super fascinating time with what I say, Dan the Man, happens to be Dan Hoquist, author of America's Electric Nazca Megalithic Marfa, Texas. It's a fascinating book. Even the cover itself, to me, is very intriguing. But without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Dan. Dan, welcome to the show, my friend.
Well, thank you, Dr. J. It's an honor to be here, and I do mean that wholeheartedly. You guys know me as Don Daniel in chat, and maybe some of the other guys know me when I call in as Don Daniel, but I'm also an author by the name of Dan Hoquist. And my book is America's Electric Nazca Megalithic Marfa, Texas. This book has its roots right here in the Dr. J Radio Live show, and without his inspiration, this book would not have been written. And I don't consider... Sorry,
let me
go,
say,
please.
I was just going to say, that's actually really humbling and flattering, because this show actually exists for the same reason. I was inspired by, Jaime Maussan and Linda Moulton Howe, but my pushing point to start doing this live regularly was Preston Dennett. And so to have inspiration to you is flattering at the very least, and very, very humbling. I just wanted to intercept and say that because, I have a big smile on my face, a big grin, and to know that, hey, somebody out there is listening and acting on it. So please continue.
And in reality, I did not include your name in the book, but the whole preface is dedicated to the Dr. J Radio Live show.
I really appreciate that.
It starts with disclosure, and it's something that you both start and end your shows with. This is in our hands, guys.
That's right. That's right. And thank you for saying that, because a lot of people seem to forget that. You cannot sit there and wait for Obama or our future president to stand on the White House lawn and say, just so you know, we've had crash saucers and we have MJ-12 dealing with beings that are on Earth and living underground and coming and going and taking people and killing people and eating children and what all these other things involve, just so you know. That's never going to happen. Like you said, Dan, it's got to be each person. Everybody's got to want it and do something about it. That's why I think I'm hopefully contributing to it. This is how I'm trying to get to disclosure, and to know that you've written a book, and you came on board from the show, and you were on listening for quite some time. Back when it was still Rome. So that's even flattering to know that when you were there through the transition, through the different radio stations that we've gone through, it's really nice to know. Anyway, didn't mean to intercept, but I just got to say.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Important.
I've been listening to you talk probably longer than anybody but your family, and I know that they have to listen to you. But anyway, you've always impressed me with the way you do the interviews, with the personal stories that you bring, and you make it much easier to listen to because you got a good pattern.
Thank you.
And that's all part of the whole thing. I consider you multi-talented.
I really appreciate that because I don't want to say bad things, but the main hosts that are talking about conspiracy, I'm not going to say names, but the ones that are making the dough or the wannabes that are trying to make the dough, they're all fakes in the sense that they require 20 to 30 questions in advance, and it boggles me. It just blows me away. For instance, when I was working with Art Bell and I had to go to my friends of guests for years and say, hey, you've done 12 interviews with me and another couple live in person before I started doing radio, but now I have to ask you for questions for Art. And then when those questions were asked to the guest, what the guest would say was, wow, what an interesting question. Thank you for asking that. And I'm thinking in my head, you dumb bell, you just wrote that question. But nonetheless,
exactly.
I appreciate that because
And,
this is
and most people don't realize that authors have to write their own bios.
That's right.
And that's a funny thing to do. But
Yes.
Anyway, the reason that I actually started this, why I came out in the first place, is because at the same time I made my discovery, you did an interview with a guy named Adam Ambrose, and I know that's not his real name, but that's what it goes by on YouTube. And it really touched me deeply. And this was by the way you were able to deal in such a personal way that made his event real. But I got impressed with Adam's bravery by coming forward. And I had a paradigm change. It made me realize that unshared knowledge is the same as hiding it, and it benefits nobody.
Yes, agreed.
The thing is, our species rises because of the discoveries of very few people. Galileo, Sir Francis Bacon, Newton, Einstein, those are just several. But imagine this little guy named Edward Leeds Scanlon. He created the Coral Castle, but he went to his grave after rediscovering how stone was actually used in that construction by Egyptians and others, like Mayans, etc. And he had actually built this to get a girl. But when he went to his grave, he took everything with him, and he never even got the girl. He benefited nobody.
I agree. I've always been fascinated with that structure itself, and I've always wanted to go visit it.
I actually went there, Dr. J. And as Dan says, it's made out of coral. It's not your standard bricks or blocks.
No.
And this gentleman used to, in the middle of the night, do his work and move these massive stone sort of things. And it was amazing. But I did go and visit it, and I found it amazing. I found the doorway amazing. It's all on a tiny little pebble, this massive 2-ton stone door, and it's perfectly balanced. The gentleman had some, great ideas, and he built that whole thing, as Dan says, for his wife or for his girlfriend.
And think if he had just come out and told people how he did it, how far along we'd be.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Okay, now let me get to the actual discovery, though. When I made this discovery, I was actually doing a landscape project in my backyard. It's a replica of Stonehenge, scale model replica of Stonehenge. And being a construction worker of 22 years, journeyman carpenter and sheet metal worker, I had to get a blueprint. And of course I did. And I noticed that the blueprint of Stonehenge complete only had one path in for the sun and no path out. And because I'm in construction, and also because I've worked on a couple of farms and whatnot, it obviously became a tool, not unlike a combine for harvesting the sun at its ripest, which is the summer solstice. And when you look at the actual blueprint of Stonehenge, it has this U-shaped backboard, which obviously focuses the sun to the altar stone, because there is no place in between these stones, and they're all circular, so they actually focus the sun to one spot. With just a little research, the first thing I found was that there'd been a recent unearthing of elongated skulls in the area, and I know this is not reported in the UK. And I've come to find out that most of discoveries won't be reported in the country of discovery. People in Australia don't know that there are Egyptian hieroglyphs all over the place.
That's right. And what people forget is that during that era, right? Okay, so if you have pyramids in Egypt, and according to mainstream history, those Egyptians could not have been in the Americas. But yet, why do we find the same types of structures? Why didn't, say, Native Americans build, tall bricks standing up, or or clay, or whatever they made of, right? Or adobes. Or why didn't they build like sort of rounded igloos? But no, they built pyramids, and that begs the question: who influenced them, and how did the Native Americans here in the Americas, of course, because see, this is an international show, so I got to make that clear, right? Because obviously people in
actually we don't like being called Native Americans, and you can listen to Russell Means speak, and he'll tell you, the word Indian is more an honor and humor at this point, because it was the first joke that Indians played on white men. We weren't Indian at all. We were the people.
Agreed. In the movie I was watching, Quiz Show, not too long ago, a movie from the early 90s taking place about the quiz show scandals, and the character played by John Turturro, Herbert Stemple, asks his son, why were they called Indians? He goes, because some white guy landed here and made a mistake, and that's
now you know why we don't want to be called natives.
Agreed. Because you are the actual people who lived here.
Right. And first, I think First Peoples is probably what the acceptable term is becoming. But actually, most tribal names for themselves translate into the people.
Yes.
So
yes.
when you say the people, we'll all know who you're talking about.
You said, Dan, that you off air before, you were kindred spirit with Blackfoot. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, back when I didn't get to go to college, I became a seeker, and I traveled all over the country. And I ran into a family of Blackfoot who took me in on their farm, and I went through the adoption ceremony, and later learned the old ways, the Blackfoot old ways. Because the matriarch of the family was a medicine woman, and I had a true vision quest, which I may put in a second book, but the first book is so there's so much to it that I could not even begin to get into my own personal life.
With that being said, actually, we've received our first caller, area code 801. That happens to be Nathan, right? You there, Nate? Maybe we lost him. That's okay. Go on, continue, Dan.
Okay. Well, anyway, let me continue with this. You had a couple of guests on a couple of days ago, and I won't mention their names, but they read the mitochondrial DNA test results from 2014 from an elongated skull found in Paracas. And they called this race Nephilim. But that was
L.A. Marzulli and Richard Shaw. That's right.
Right.
Watch your
personally, I read the same results. Okay, and it states that the skull shows, quote, mutations in DNA, unquote, that are not consistent with any known life on Earth. Therefore, they are not hybrids, but are our genetic ancestors. They are the progenitors, because they cannot be the progeny of a human mix. In other words, a human mix could not produce an alien mutation. Okay?
You're right, and that's why you use the word progenitors, which means they've had to have been before the first. That's what it essentially means.
So
the
that
first
makes
generation.
made them, in my mind, the Anunnaki. Now, I've had a recent validation of this from none other than the Vatican. A recent book by an Italian, he's an Italian linguist, by the way, who his name is Mauro Biglino, and I won't bother with his title because I'm not advertising his book, but also because it's only in Italian so far, and I was real fortunate to have this book dissected for me. What it shows is that when he went to do his report to the Vatican, they fired him because the ancient Hebrew seemed to parallel Sumerian stories instead of the Roman Empire, etc., that we're obviously lied to about. But instead of giving up, he wrote his book, and what he did is, hello?
Yeah,
hello?
We're here.
Yeah, he paralleled all of the ancient Hebrew and the ancient Sumerian, which comes straight from the Atrahasis, the Enuma Elish, and those are the two. If you're studying Anunnaki, those are the two books to actually study.
Yeah, the Elongated.
Now, the thing is, they actually name them as the Anunnaki. So this is a third-party validation that these people are the Anunnaki. And you find them all over the place. So they were a race that was here. They were not a mutation of humanoid. And when you look at an elongated skull, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Anunnaki, or
how about a gray
alien? The Egyptian. What's the name of that god who had the elongated skull? That's what I think of, or something that's alien. Exactly.
Okay. Well, in today, we have the gray aliens everywhere. We have pictures of them, and they all look just like that elongated skull. So I have to
disagree with you, Dan. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but I have to disagree with you. I did follow Brian Forrester's work, who's done a lot of work at Practice with the skulls and the elongated skulls.
Yeah, matter of fact, that was his DNA test.
Yeah, but when
he's
you
just
mention
reading it wrong.
Zeta Gray, I think of that back head that's very wide. Or if there was a similar skull, I'd have to say it was Lloyd Pye's. He's a Star Child skull. That's probably
the only thing is the Star Child skull has shown human parts in it, in the genes.
That's true.
It's not an actual progenitor. It's a hybrid. Okay, but in order to have a race of people who have a DNA that doesn't match anything on Earth, then guess what? They are not of Earth.
We actually have, here's a written question for you. Bernard in San Francisco, California. Remember that song? San Francisco. Anyway, nonetheless, here he goes. He wants to know if Dan has an opinion about Zecharia Sitchin's work on the Sumerian tablets.
I absolutely do. Zecharia Sitchin is the only, or the only archaeologist that I can think of that has actually made a discovery. All the other discoveries are made by shepherders, llama walkers, and people who throw rocks or run around hills until credentialed people actually call it Troy. Zecharia Sitchin, it's his work, and his work alone that is the reason that we can actually translate cuneiform. And right now you can actually get software that translates for you, and check this all yourself. And the funny thing is that seal that he used to show with the planets, There's been a recent test done on that, all right? And it's by mathematics, using Sumerian math, which is a base 6. Those planets on that scroll are exactly within 0.4 400ths of the size and the relation in orbit to where they actually are. Now, how could Sumerians know this?
They didn't without it. They didn't have telescopes, and especially telescopes that can see that far.
Right.
And from what we know, wasn't the telescope discovered around the 15th century?
Galileo, yeah. Mm-hmm. So they actually had to be in outer space, or they were
told by someone
were
from
told,
there.
Yes,
yeah,
right.
I think Johnny had a question. Go ahead, Johnny.
I was going to say, isn't the whole story of Enki that he was, the first god here that came from another world, another planet? He's certainly a giant, wasn't he? He was an Elohim himself, a Nephilim. He's sitting down.
Actually, he was a purebred. He was a purebred Anunna, because the key is actually the Earth itself.
Yeah, but in that, sorry to interrupt you there, Dr. Jag. What I could hear was that the tablet you're talking about, which was a little scroll that they used to roll in clay, and then out came the picture. And on the left side of what is like a man and a woman sitting down, probably on a throne, and then there's other people that you can clearly see are standing there. So it shows that these two sitting down are very, very much giants.
That's Nimrod. That's not Enki. That's Nimrod.
Okay, well,
Nimrod was one of the sons. He was an Elohim.
On the tablet that you're talking about, it shows where it's got the constellation that we're actually referring to. I thought that was Enki and his wife.
I don't think so. I think it is Nimrod.
We got another question here for you. This is Jen in Houston, Texas. Wants to know, how long has Dan been working on this?
It's been a full year now since I made the first discovery of the Marfa lines, and the Marfa lines. Anybody out there who can get to Google Earth can follow along just by going to Marfa, Texas, okay, and zooming out to about 12,000 foot off of the floor, and you'll start seeing these dark lines. The first thing you'll see on the plateau are these radiant lines. Now, there are 7 sections of these, which actually means that this is a symbol of Atlantis. 7 radiant solar symbols are a symbol of ancient Atlantis. These radiant sections are 10 miles wide each. So just in that area, that's 70 miles of nothing but these huge radiant patterns that only one line will go for 5 miles.
Where do you think, well, first of all, let me ask you this. It's a 2-part question. I want to ask you about, I'm looking at the Google Earth image where you connected the red lines, and it is very, very intricate. I mean, you see a camel that's almost wearing a mask, so sort of like over its eyes, but it's very pronounced. So how did you come across that? The second part would have to be, the Marfa lights. Are they occurring in this area? And then I'm going to add a third part. You mentioned something about, or I read something here about 4 types of Nazca lines in America.
There actually, yes, there are 4 types of lines in Marfa. There are regular dark lines. These lines go for literally 50, 60 miles. Anything that von Daniken has expressed over Nazca is there in Texas too. Only it's a little more intricate. A lot of the art and whatnot actually has these dark lines. The second one is a road type line. Now I don't consider them roads because we didn't have machinery to do it, and there isn't enough time, and there's no record of any construction being done other than basically repaving over. Fortunately, the lines that exist there are just reused by Texans who have come into the area.
I see a European question, so let me see if Johnny wants to ask it, or I will. Go ahead, Johnny, if you could see what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I've got Douglas in Scotland on Facebook, and he's asking Dan there, Dan, what's your thoughts on Mr. Zachariah Sitchin as a Freemason? Have you ever heard that before? Some say that he's an agent provocateur and causing lies. What's your take on that?
Well, Mr. Sitchin was a Mason, and that's probably what actually started or struck the fire to him, because the Mason hidden knowledge is basically Egyptian and Hermetic, and this all goes back to the same thing. So Zachariah Sitchin was obviously he was struck by the Sumerian, the Egyptian, and everything else except for a Christian value there. And he is right. He was right.
Here's another one. I'm gonna go ahead and ask it, even though it's across the Atlantic pond. This comes from Gordon in Zurich. I know you're keeping some good money over there. A lot of American money in Zurich, Switzerland. Wants to know if any of his findings point to Sirius. Fantastic question for multiple reasons. What do you say, Dan?
Well, Sirius is actually Isis. Okay, that is considered Isis in Egypt. And there, if you look at the Giza Plateau,
and we're not talking about the terror group. We're talking about the god. Just to make that clear, yeah. Yeah. Sirius, the star, is where everything actually points to in Egypt, and that's because of their reverence for Isis. They named Sirius the Isis because the next star to come up would be the sun on the equinox or solstice. During the equinox, the belt of Orion actually points to Sirius, which points to where the sun will rise on the horizon, and that's where you get the name Horizon is from Horus. Another god from Egypt, of course, we got Isis, Osiris, Horus, Thoth or Thoth, Set or Seth, that's one of my favorites. And there's a few more. Sanskrit, what's the name of that
Sanskrit.
one? No, Sanskrits are the type of writing. The god from Egypt is something along the lines of that, and I will find it. Here's a question actually from...
well, I've got one actually that's on par with what we're just saying there, and it's from Justin in Folkestone, England, and she's asking, does that make it? Does when you're talking about, I suppose, with regard to the what's his name, one being the other, what she's saying here, does that make Planet X the same as Nibiru then?
Yeah, well, actually, this is something that Zachariah Sitchin gets run over the coals for. Because he mistranslated Marduk, which is the name of the planet, into Nibiru, which is the Anunnas or Anunnaki's term for heaven. That's what Nibiru translates out to. So when you see heaven in the Old Testament, that's actually talking about Nibiru, with golden streets and everything.
Speaking of that, I'm going to go ahead and ask this question since it's been sitting for a while. And then, of course, we have a caller who has got a question. Sarah Brown in Annapolis, Maryland. If the Anunnaki wanted gold, why has no evidence of them been found in California during the gold rush?
Actually, there has been. This is one of my first discoveries was because I'm here in Southern California. I thought that I was dealing with the area that I'm living in. When I first started doing solstice overlays, or actually Stonehenge overlays, I found this through Google Earth that they have a layer function along with a line function, and I did a layer of Stonehenge of the blueprint and transferred it over my area of Southern California. It didn't quite fit, so I followed the equinox line to Santa Catalina. Santa Catalina was known prior as Stonehenge Island. Okay? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I didn't want to interrupt your point. I'm going to let you finish that. I was going to say, because Johnny's got a question he's sitting on, and we have a caller, but I don't want to interrupt your train of thought. So go ahead and finish before I bring the caller on and Johnny's question.
When they did do a dig in Santa Catalina, it was done by a not an archaeologist, just a guy who saw this as a Stonehenge, and so he started digging. He dug up 3,700 giant skeletons, and prior to that, elongated skulls, some of which were painted red. So yes, there has been evidence of Anunnaki here in Southern California, but this is the land of giants. See, from Santa Catalina, I did a solstice line, and it passes over the place where we now think of as a UFO entrance, underwater entrance to Miami Harbor. Okay, and this same line travels exactly over the Grand Canyon, and then to the farthest eastern point of the North American continent, which is Nova Scotia, right around Shag Harbor, by the way. And I found...
should we say there was a crash and retrieval in, I believe, 64, Shag Harbor, Canada.
Shag Harbor incident. They never did recover that vehicle. They
flew
followed it
off.
underwater.
Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
Now when I did this line, I tried to validate it by doing another overlay of Stonehenge as using the Grand Canyon as the altar of Stonehenge. And guess what? North America's Stonehenge is the Grand Canyon.
Interesting. Really
okay?
Interesting.
The line matches the Catalina line, and because I'm a Dr. J fan, I remembered old Phil Schneider, the geoengineer who came out and said that he'd been digging tunnels all over the United States. And guess where this line is?
Dulce.
It's exactly matching from Catalina to Nova Scotia.
Ah,
exactly.
With that being said, let me go ahead and bring the caller. I know he's got a question. 801. Yeah, it's Nathan, right?
Yes, it is.
How you doing, Nate?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing awesome, as you hear.
Hi, Nathan.
Got anything you got to ask to Dan?
Hello. Yeah, Dan, I have a question for you. Since you researched the Nephilim, and it sounds like you are familiar with the Egyptian gods, since they do have elongated skulls, do you believe the Egyptian gods are part of the Nine, if you're familiar with what the Nine is?
I'm part of the Nine. Are you talking about the Masters? The Ascended Masters?
Kind of, yes.
Okay, well, in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which I actually, in my book, I tell people to actually listen to first before reading them, because in the Emerald Tablets, Thoth himself says that the cadence of the pattern of the words in the tablet, no matter what language are read, if you are ready for the knowledge, it will ascend you, and that's really neat. But he also says that that Enki lives in the flower of life at the center of the earth, surrounded by the ascended masters of Anunnaki, because they couldn't go back to Nibiru. They had become Earth-oriented because of our gravity. Now, consider Zecharia Sitchin said that Nibiru is 5 times the size of Earth. These people would be incredibly strong, which this is what the Egyptians record, is that the gods were incredibly strong. And they used natural substances just like an artist would pigment.
That's right. As a matter of fact, that's where all the pigments came from. And I remember them saying that red pigment in particular was very rare because of what it, if I'm not mistaken, I think it needed gold or something like that to create it. I can't be quoted on that. But anyway, Johnny's got a question. I believe in the UK it's originating. Go ahead, Johnny.
It's actually coming from Ireland. It's Patrick in Ireland. Sorry, Rory in Ireland. And he asked Dan, what's your take on a flat Earth? Does he believe there's a dome that we're locked into?
No, absolutely not. When you work with the Google Earth functions, you'll understand what I'm talking about, especially the line function. The way I found everything I found, including Marfa, Texas, is by following solstice lines after doing overlays of particular places like Machu Picchu, Easter Island, and the Great Pyramid itself, okay? Because every pyramid is a circle, and every north-facing pyramid has a natural solstice and equinox line built in. But when you use the line function in Google Earth, you'll understand how precise you have to be. It follows the curve of the Earth. It could not do otherwise. And as a Blackfoot, I gotta say that circle is the easiest form in nature, and you can test this yourself by a Mr. Wizard thing of hot candle wax in water. What forms spheres?
Hey, Dan.
Yes, sir.
This is Tom. In fact, the sailing, for years they used the circle. There's the navigation thing with sailing that has been going on since the early days of sailing, was using the full circle navigation, and it was based on a shorter route of the curvature of the Earth. Yeah,
and this whole flat Earth thing, I think, is something done by our government as a COINTELPRO. You know, they're trying to disrupt any kind of disclosure.
I have to disagree with that myself. I'm not a flat earther, but in the Bible it does mention certain paragraphs that certainly sort of lead towards that understanding. It talks about 4 corners of the Earth. We don't have any corners on a globe. It talks about that great sky made of molten glass, like molten glass. This is mentioned in the Bible. That's just my own sort of understandings of people that talk about it. But there are quotes of it. If I'm not mistaken, it was only 300 or 500 years ago that everyone thought the Earth was flat. But it's changed, you know. But and they're called globalists.
The only thing is the Bible itself is not the only source of information.
And don't forget that there's several ancient texts before that, and there's only 5,000 people in the Flat Earth Society. What does that tell you? And first of all, talking about the 4 corners of the globe, that was long before Magellan discovered that we were round. And if Earth was flat, therefore every other planet would be flat. Why would we be the exception? So there's just so much evidence. I'm a skydiver.
And the Bible actually tells of spheres that were seen by people who were taken out.
Yeah. And I know what I see.
I have pilot friends. Okay, I'm a pilot, and I have pilot friends, and they say to me that in my light aircraft, if I was to do 100 miles, then I would have to yoke my stick forward multiple times. He says I never have to do that. And if I was on a flat or round Earth, then I'd actually be going off up into space. So these are pilots' arguments. There are points to this.
But see, the amount of people that believe in extraterrestrials or ancient astronauts is in the millions, hundreds of millions. Some even say in the billions. But there's only 5,000 people in the entire world out of 7 billion that believe in this, and none of them has any sort of education. And believe me, I've spoken to him. Why? Because I've booked one for Art Bell's show, and he was laughed out to hell to the point where he threatened a lawsuit. So I don't.
I don't care about lawsuits, Dr. J. I'm just trying to tell you that there are lots of people. We have to be unbiased on this show. We cannot just take one side.
I agree.
And a lot of people do say off the air that they believe that, for instance, an example, in England, there are people that say that 26 miles away is France and the what they call the Cliffs of Dover. So from France, you can see the Cliffs of Dover. That's 26 miles away. They're less than 300 feet from the base to the top. Now, that's 26 miles away. With a naked eye, you can see that on one day. So if the rule is that every 15 miles it dips and you can't see the boat, but what you get is a mirage that the boat is in the air, in the sky, like you hear about, in China they have these cities floating in the sky as a mirage. It has to be debated. It cannot just be dismissed.
I agree.
It doesn't take the height of the actual.
We're talking about being open-minded and talking about UFOs and aliens and spirits and supernatural and ghosts. We have all these debates on all these shows we have.
I've
Let's be
been
open-minded.
privy to the flat Earth debates. I've been a part of it. I've seen it. I've even aired it, and I've heard everything there is to know about it. And there's nothing that convinces me that there's any bit of shred of truth. For instance, what about all these images we keep getting from SpaceX, where you see the Earth in the background? It's round. But, again, that's a whole different topic.
Where are these images coming from?
It's actually egg-shaped.
Let's stick to
they
Dan's
have recently
topic.
found that the Earth is egg-shaped.
Let's stick to yes, exactly, elliptical. Let's stick to your research. And real quick, let me just ask Nate if he's got anything he wants to ask Dan before we continue.
As far, not really, but I mean, to think the flat Earth is flat is pretty asinine in my opinion. I mean, you just look at the context of water and rain, how it naturally forms into a teardrop or a raindrop. It's a force of gravity, and if you understand how ripples change into waves in the ocean, it comes in a circular pattern and spreads out. It's just like Dan was saying earlier. It's the
easiest form for nature to have.
Exactly.
Now, let me get back to. I know we've only got a few minutes, so I want to take you out to Marfa and exactly how I found it. And this is by taking the simplest measure, and this is how I'm pretty sure that this is Anunnaki, because if you draw a line from corner to corner over the apex, directly over the apex of the Great Pyramid, and extend those lines across the Earth, you end up with one that it links exactly to the altar of Stonehenge. And most people don't know that because they've never extended the lines. And then it goes right straight to a place called Aden in the peninsula, the
Middle East,
outside. Anyway. This is probably the same lab mentioned in the Atrahasis as Eden. From there, it travels across.
You're talking about Garden of Eden.
Yes, and because the Atrahasis calls it a laboratory.
Yes.
It's the Sinai Peninsula. I'm sorry. Anyway,
is it okay, Dan? I'm actually going to. I want to go past an hour if you don't mind.
Sure.
You're okay with that? Okay, cool.
Not at all. We can. I love to talk. I was afraid I wouldn't get to.
No. In about a little over 10 minutes, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break. Just keep that in mind. But by all means, keep it coming. Here's a question I got here. There's a. Wow. This is actually a comment. This is coming for. I don't even know if I should say it. I'll just copy and paste it. for Johnny to read here. Let's see it. Anyhow, let's talk about the actual Marfa lights.
Okay. When you get into Marfa, of course, the people there. The first thing you do is you ask them, what do they think of? And every single one that I ask has the same answer. It's plasma. Okay, because it can't be seen on full moons. And by the way, anybody going out there to see the lights? And I did not know. I went out there during a full moon because there's nowhere to be found. This little bit of information that you can't see them in a full moon or in daylight. But the locals there say that if it's happening in the daytime as well as night.
That's right. And the fact is, on top of that, we actually have people that have gone to film the Marfa lights, and yet they keep going on and on. I mean, as if they get closer, the Marfa light moves. So it's like they never get to it.
Yeah, and this has to do with the lights too, or the lines. And this is why I say that these lines have to be associated with the lights. I did a chapter that basically redid the 1992 experience that Edson Hendricks had. He's an electrical engineer, master's electrical engineer, who actually built a piece of equipment to test electromagnetic, to go out to Marfa and test it. So he went out there and saw probably the best sighting ever seen of the Marfa lights in action. And basically, you can take every single one of his sightings, which includes directions, how far the lights were, what he saw, whether they were cars, etc., etc., etc. And these are directly associated with where I found the lines. You can correlate each of his sightings with the lines that I found. Now, another thing that I found in Marfa, Texas, when I pulled in, I meant to get several soil samples, but the soil there is amazing. I've never seen anything like it. I've never been anywhere like it, and I've been 2/3 the way across the United States, most of it hitchhiking, so I'm really, really close to the Earth, But when you get out there, the whole plateau is crystal. And it doesn't matter if it's soil or rock or what kind of rock. It runs about 60% quartz crystal over the whole area.
And speaking of quartz crystal, that actually has a lot of properties that a lot of the New Agers use for, say, meditation. Apparently, it goes even further than that. For instance, why were the crystal skulls made out of quartz crystal? There's properties that I can't say them, in that sense, but I do know that a lot of people consider them sacred, as well do a lot of the ancients. But with that being said, I'm going to let Johnny tell a quick little story of a video that he brought to my attention, which I thought was fantastic. And then, of course, we're going to come back to your research. Go ahead, Johnny.
Okay.
Johnny
We lost him.
No, he's still on. I think he's muted. Johnny Webb, you there? Okay, I guess we'll come back to them. Anyhow, let's go back to what you were saying about quartz before I interrupted you, because maybe you can inform me why it was so precious to the ancients.
Well, it's not what you think. This is technology. Quartz crystal is natural quartz, especially, is what's used in all your computers. Every single one of them. It has properties of capacitor, of battery, of storage. And there's a man named John Hutchison.
Yes.
He's a bit of a mad scientist with electricity. And he's doing amazing things with crystal.
And here's the great things about John Hutchinson. I know a few people who know him. We've invited him to the show. We will get him on. That's a fact.
Great.
And he is not educated, but is extremely smart. And in some essence is sort of like Tesla, because he is defying the laws of physics. If you've seen some of the videos, he can make a cannonball levitate and hit the ceiling. And he moved from Canada to, I believe, Minnesota. And what is he doing? He's the mad scientist, as you said, working for the government, not as under official capacity, but officially by taking their contracts. I thought that was fantastic. Anyhow, Johnny is ready, if I'm not mistaken. You ready there, Johnny?
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Nature called, but yeah, I'm back. But yes. Sorry, Dan. Yeah, I was just asked to explain. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go on, and we sort of talk about deceptions and things like that on this show. And one of them that I felt was a deception for me was our British astronaut Tim. What let me down was there was a video of George Bush, the father, in his wheelchair being wheeled into
let's also
NASA's
mention,
center.
Johnny, the fact that the time that Tim was supposed to have been in space, the time where George Bush was, when you're going to continue the story, was taken months before Tim was.
That's in fact, yeah.
So
that's fascinating. But as I say, what you see in this video clip, which is totally by accident, I don't think they understood what they were doing, or letting out of the bag in the sense. It was a group of like main reporters, CNN, your typical news group.
Fox, yeah.
And they were filming in I think it was Houston's control center for NASA.
Center, that's right.
Space Center, yeah. And as he's wheeling through, there's massive big screens, and what you can see is the British astronaut Tim, which looks like he's on the space shuttle, and he's holding a stick with a green tennis ball on it. And he's moving it about, and he's in some sort of chat. But remember, this whole clip is about watching George Bush being wheeled through. So you have to be sort of cautious of what's going on in the background to really have even noticed it. But what you see, as I say, is Tim holding this ball and moving it around on this stick. And then someone on YouTube has managed to get the footage that is supposedly Tim in space doing exactly the same
on the ISS.
With water. With water. So what it was sort of suggesting was that there's a lot of green screen stuff going on that's being done on Earth. And are they really up there, Remember the movie... what was it called? Capricorn 1? It's interesting,
Yes. And I actually agree that we're probably faking everything beyond the low orbit, mostly because of the radiation. We cannot send people up I'm a journeyman sheet metal worker, in a craft that's basic sheet metal into cosmic radiation like that. We can't do it. And on that subject, the highest radiation is gamma. The next is X-ray. So guys, when you have X-rays and they tell you, oh, there's nothing they can do, it's not doing anything, don't believe them, because you don't get rid of radiation. It stays with you and adds up through your life.
I always notice that in the hospitals in England, if you go and have an X-ray, that they stand behind a big screen and they get your friends or family that are there with you to put on these big lead aprons.
We actually have Nate's got a question. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, just two quick questions. One would be the quartz one, which we can talk about later with John Hutchinson. Well, they both relate to him because he's a friend of mine. And he's actually doing anti-radiation research as we speak right now, which he has told me. So I thought I'd just bring that up.
So you mean as if like he's trying to clean up places like Chernobyl or the fallout from Fukushima?
He hasn't elaborated on it. He just said he's doing anti-radiation research as he speaks right now. I know he has what he calls his plasma gun in his apartment, and
that's right.
He lives in Oregon, actually.
Oregon, okay. So he moved out of Minnesota, or was it always Oregon?
It's in, I'm trying to think. I'd have to look at my email, but
It's okay.
I think it's
Don't worry.
Nesky, Oregon is what it is. It's off the coastline.
But I know he lives with his wife, and he's got like a giant sort of antenna or death ray, a Tesla coil outside his front house, right? Like 20, 30 feet tall, right?
Correct. Yeah, and if with some of his experience that I've seen with quartz, how he uses his Hutchison effect on there, he'll use different type of frequencies, and it will cause the quartz crystal to actually illuminate. And the neat thing about quartz is it holds a lot of information.
And exactly, Michael Tellinger, and I know it's unseemly for an author to tell people go see this guy, but he did a recent video with Jim Mars, also a real star in my book. But Michael Tellinger will tell you all about the vibrational frequencies of quartz and exactly what's going on with his area, because he's making vibrational noises with it, and that all has to do with plasma.
I'm glad you actually mentioned those two names, because both of them are going to be here live in August. So,
great.
Yeah, be ready to talk directly to Jim. Tellinger, on the other hand, whether it's live or pre-recorded is hard to say because of his proximity in South Africa. South Africa, actually. But yeah, nonetheless. Yeah. Anyway, go on. I just wanted to intercept there and be like, boom, the two guys you said are in the line, because they both appeared on the show multiple times, and Jim is a fantastic guy. When I call, he sees the caller ID and he's like, "Hey, Dr. J, how you doing?" The reason why he's not on this month is he's got a deadline on August 1st, so he told me to call him on August 2nd. So anyway, he'll be on in literally the next few weeks, as will Linda Moulton Howe, making a return next Tuesday coming up. The next show will be Richard Dolan, Wednesday, John Lear, and all these cool guests that everybody likes to hear. So, but I just wanted to throw that in there. I'm glad you mentioned those two names, because
I am in the Jim Mars camp when Jim Mars says that he asks people, now how many alien species does it take to actually answer all the questions?
Yes.
And the answer is one. Okay.
It's true.
Now so far I've evidence that the Anunnaki are involved in Stonehenge, that they have a great reverence for the solstice paths and the equinox paths, rather than north-south. By the way, there's no real Giza meridian. It's actually based on ancient sacred geometry, or what we call sacred geometry. But out there in Marfa, the whole area is a quartz cap. Now the same thing occurs in Nazca, and Nazca is famous not only for its lines and glyphs, but it's famous because its quartz gets sold all over the earth, especially for computer enhancements. And most people don't know that.
Agreed. Here's a question, and then, of course, I'm going to turn it over to Johnny for yet another one before we go to our break. And as a matter of fact, we should probably be taking a break right now, but I'm going to get these two questions in first. Sonia in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, wants to know if you, Dan, has had any UFO experiences.
Actually, I had a few, but as soon as I made this discovery public on YouTube, I started getting inundated by aerial phenomena, and I have this on my YouTube channel, which, by the way, is after Dr. J's own teachings. Everything is DonDaniel-DanHoquist.com or DonDaniel-Dan Hoquist on YouTube. And the same thing on Facebook. You can enter my
Twitter.
name or Don Daniel.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, as everyone can see, it's not only on the website. If you happen to be watching it from the website, you'll see an image where it says, Dan, you see Dan's picture right underneath. You'll see the link, which is, if I'm not mistaken, it's a hot link directly to his website. And if it's not a hot link there, it's a hot link definitely in the in his bio. Now, before we take a break, go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, sorry, guys. Yeah, Dan, what's your take on that new Spielberg movie that's coming out? It's called the BFG, or the Big Friendly Giant, and it's a Roald Dahl movie book that was turned into a movie. But what I found fascinating about the book was that in the book it mentioned not only giants, but giants interacting with the Queen of England and being conscious of these giants, and understanding there was 300 people missing in England every year, and it was addressing all these subjects. It was addressing Stockholm syndrome and all of these things, like child abduction. I just wondered, what's your thoughts on books that sort of defer giants as sort of evil?
Giants are a part of this, as I've already found in Catalina and throughout California. By the way, any place that has a San or Santa in the name of a city out here in California, giants have been dug up in. Okay, so as far as the movie goes, the Anunnaki regarded giants as stupid, okay, and they wanted to get rid of them, according to their chronicles. Now, recently, I found a YouTube event of what looks like a giant walking into on the ridge and walking into a volcano. Okay, so thinking that they're gone is probably wrong. I don't believe that they're Bigfoot, though.
With that being said, I gotta say we have to take a break. Everybody stay online. Of course, you too, Nate, Dan, Johnny, and Tom, and anybody else who's been asking questions, writing questions, by all means, we will continue to take them as we continue to speak with Dan Hoquist on his fantastic research and book. And like I said, I'm very, very humbled to know this. I just want to warn you guys, this is something that I probably should have said before we went live. Just remember that we are live, so even though you're not hearing the music, the guests will be. So if I could ask you guys to stay quiet while we play the break. Everybody stay tuned. Dr. J Radio Live will be right back.
This is Mike Dukakis, the former governor of Massachusetts, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
I'm professional baseball player Trevor Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
That is correct. You just heard from professional baseball player who was a pitcher for the Los Angeles Anaheim Angels. It's weird. It should just be the Anaheim Angels. Nonetheless, welcome back to the second hour of, as you heard already, Dr. J Radio Live, broadcasting live on the Coast to Coast PM Radio Network, where I happen to be in the city of Angels, where it is officially 8:05 p.m. Pacific time. Same thing with my guest. I'm actually going to go from west to east as I introduce everybody back here. So we got Dan Hoquist. Our guest is also in Southern California, same time zone. We have caller Nate, if he doesn't mind me saying Nate, who happens to be in Mountain Time, Utah, where it is a little after 9:06 p.m. to be exact. And of course we got Tom Schaefer, webmaster, contributor, and much more on literally on the East Coast. He's also an author himself, and that is literally 11:06 is it 6 or 8 p.m. at this point? It's 8. Anyhow, and across the Atlantic pond, Johnny Webb, who not only contributes on air, lots off air, and I feel so bad for keeping him up so late at night, or should I say in the morning. This poor guy is literally up at 4:08 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Thanks again for Johnny for doing that. Anyhow, with that being said, I want to give our guest a chance to promote his work. I know you, Dan, you just talked about your website, but talk a little bit about where people, well, first of all, let me say, every guest, including Dan, who's appeared on the show in the last 2 years since Tom started doing our website, which doesn't include guests who unfortunately passed away or who I haven't brought back since. But all the guests, their books or videos are available by clicking on the books and videos tab, and it'll take you directly to where they're selling them from. And as a matter of fact, there's actually a special going on for L.A. Marzulli's set. You save a big chunk of money, and you get a whole lot of free stuff. And there's a little, yes, you can go to the books and videos tab, but it's going to charge you retail. But if you click on that little promo link, or that little image that he made for us, that you'll see the special for L.A. Marzulli, you'll get everything for, I think combined, it's probably well over $100, maybe $120 for $39.99. Great deal, because it includes the Watchers movies, which are fantastic. But anyhow, Dan, what do you have to say? Let's talk about where people, of course, we know where they can get your book, but tell people about yourself again, about your website, what's on there, and a little bit more about your book for those who caught on the show late.
Sure. Again, I'm one of Dr. J's biggest fans. But the book itself is American.
I'm so humbled every time I hear that, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Dan.
No problem. And I just have to mention that the reason for this book is your interview with Preston Dennett. And I know that you mentioned that he's the cause of you doing this.
That's right.
And I had a little back and forth with him in January after your interview. Mm-hmm. And he basically said, I am way too busy and your job is way too big, but if you need help. So he basically gave me the incentive.
Good.
Good.
Well, I'm going to bring him back just for you, for that matter. Literally, just so that you have a chance to chat with him, because he's so cool. He's currently working on his 21st book. He just released 2 volumes, so it's 19 and 20 of the books, because before that it was 18. The 18th book was UFOs over Arizona. The 19th, I believe, is called Out of This World, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Anyway, fantastic books. I have the first 18, but I haven't seen them since to get the most recent ones. And almost all of them are about extraterrestrials and UFOs, but he's got some that are not. For instance, there's one that's about paranormal in California, which covers everything under the sun. Haunted houses, places that ETs used to frequent, underground bases. That's where I first heard about the gold mine that was found, in Los Angeles. And when they went there looking for gold, what they did is they opened up a cavern that had a series of mazes, and they were like blown away because they weren't natural. It was clear that
they are subterranean people.
Yes, and then what they found were lizard-like. That's the way they described them in 1936. Lizard-like people came and attacked them, scared the crap out of them. So they left as fast as they can and sealed off the mine. And from what I understand, homes are literally built over this maze of underground
Santa
labs.
Monica.
Yeah.
Again, the Santa.
Yes.
Okay, or Santa. What the Catholic Church knows is so far into the Sumerian culture, it is not funny. And I'm so sorry for the Catholics who have been misled by well-meaning priests and whatnot. They know no better, so forgive them.
Yes.
Anyway, my book is America's Electric Nazca, Megalithic Marfa, Texas. It's available on Amazon and Kindle, and if you have Amazon or Kindle Prime, you can read it right now for free. After August, it'll go to $9.99, and it's a much better read on the Kindle. By the way, the cost of the paperback runs about $29, and that's kind of pricey because of all the images. And I did that on purpose because
they charge you more for each color page. I know that for a fact because I ghost written a book for somebody whose name I'm gonna leave unsaid, but I know exactly what you and Tom went through. But anyway, continue, Dan. Go ahead.
So the best way to read this book is on Kindle, but if you get the paperback, it's still a good read, but it is a little pricey. So I hope y'all will forgive me that.
They will, because the images that you've shown us are fantastic, and for those of you who are watching this directly off our website, can see the images as we're toggling through them as Dan is speaking on that subject. Real quick, let me go back to that special offer now that it's in front of me. You get L.A. Marzulli's latest book, which is fantastic, just like you, Dan and Tom. It costs a lot because of all the color images of the skulls, the fairy, the x-ray of the fairy with the buckshot, apparently 7 buckshot, number 7 is what a hunter claimed it as. And you also get, let me see which Watchers. Watcher 7, a fantastic a fantastic film. It's one of the best, actually. Watchers 7 through 10 are by far better than the first 6, although of the first 6, I'd have to say 6 is better than the first 1 through 5. But that's just
and that's actually where I'm more active is on the YouTube channel.
Yes.
I am doing a new series on the Marfa flight that I went out in April and validated everything photographically. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to finish the L.A. Marzulli plan now that I have the full list in front of me. So you get the newest film, The Watchers 10 DNA. That's what it's called, the subtitle. Fantastic film. I was at the private screening of it before they came on as guests. You also get a copy of his book before, or the one I was just speaking about, Nephilim Hybrids. Then you get another CD called Communion, and a year of paranormal prophecy and supernatural, a subscription to that, and Watchers 3, that's also in the package, and this is all for $39.99. All you have to do is click on that hot link on our site. So again, if you add up the cost of these, there's $20, $19.99, $10, $24, $20. And so you got $93.99 down to $39.99. So it's almost the price is literally reversed. Anyhow, I'm going to leave it up for you guys out there to check that out. It's a fantastic thing. And Dan, I know you were part of the show, so you got a chance to hear directly from them. But let's go back. Let me let you finish talking about your site, what else is available on the site, etc., before I bring on Johnny's question.
Well, again, I just wanted to mention that I'm more active on YouTube. If you want to get a hold of me, that's probably the best way to do it. Otherwise, you can contact me on my web page. It's everything is brand new. Bear with me while I make changes. And as far as the second book, it looks like there's something in the makes, but right now I'm concentrating on making better videos, especially because of the Watcher series, which it sounds like a great buy. And don't discount knowledge just because you don't agree with some things, because the other knowledge they have in there is well worth the price.
Agreed. And you know what? Knowledge is power, despite what anybody may think. Johnny, have we lost you? Are you there? I know you had a question about giants. Johnny Webb. Okay, nonetheless, he's gone.
Yes, sorry, Dr. J, I'm
Okay.
here. I don't know why we're getting a delay there. Now, I've got two questions coming on Facebook.
Sure.
The first one's from Esther in Sheffield in England. And she asks, Dan, Nazca lines were based on shaven mountain tops with space landing runways.
Thank you for saying that. That's actually fantastic.
So it's actually still continuing. It says, space landing runways. What does the Texan Nazca lines mean to Texans?
Well, there are the same kind of plateaus that are shaved literally stone cold level.
Like runways, right?
And yes, there are. And they're actually outlined like a very, very angled, very squared off angles. And I picture that in my newest video on YouTube. That's the part 1 of this new Marfa flight series, and I'm calling it Texas Electric Nazca.
Johnny,
Okay.
Go ahead. Continue with your second question.
Well, this one comes in from Neil in Londonderry, Northern Ireland, and that's the first time we've had a Northern Ireland call.
That's right.
He says you mentioned.
Yeah.
He says you mentioned Roy Schneider's DUMBs, deep underground military bases, but what's your take on my labs? I suppose he means military labs.
Yeah, my lab is military abductions, is what it actually stands for. It's an acronym. I don't remember the whole word off the top, but it actually I know what it is. It's MIL is for military, AB or ABS is for abductions. So military abductions. What is your take on those, Dan? So essentially,
I actually found an ancient geoglyph of apparently an elongated-headed person with one of those little Sumerian DNA suitcases on top of the Dulce Plateau. So these lines and geoglyphs are all over the place.
can you give us some other examples of where else on Earth we could find things such as the Nazca lines?
Now, something that isn't in the book, and I did want to get to on your show, is I found these areas of rectangular areas that are colored red, green, and some are actually multicolored or varied colors. And I found these in the Marfa Plateau area and just outside, and also in the waters off Coronado Island. Okay? Now, it validates their presence.
Coronado Island, first of all, let me say something about that. Both Preston Dennett and Yvonne Smith, about 15 years later, have written a book about an incident there, that the Coronado Hotel, and during Bill Clinton's presidency, there was a mass abduction. where even Secret Service agents have come forward saying that they were abducted, which begs the question, was POTUS, President of the United States of America, taken as an alien abductee? And Coronado also happens to be where the Navy SEALs train. So it's a very fantastic island with
and
history.
On Google Earth, it's actually an artificial island that's in an artificial canal. And fortunately, even though Google Earth has animated their water functions, you can still see there are walkways between the island and the mainland. Now, these walkways, they are attached to military units there. And we actually have a space agency on Coronado Island. Now, why is that? And there's a park named Star Park that's made exactly like a Stonehenge, only with a star on it. So I did an overlay of Stonehenge there, and it takes you out directly to an area called the Blythe Giants. Now, this is exactly like the UK giant and horse. Well, we have them here in California, and that apparently turns out to be a vernal or spring equinox marker for this area that I live in Southern California. And that is the nature of our Blythe giant. They are big geoglyphs that are outlined exactly like the Stafford or Sheffield. Johnny could probably tell better. I think it's Sheffield. I'm not sure, but it's the massive Hercules feature there. Mm-hmm. The outlines are the same that you'll find in the Blythe giant. And it forms the right triangle to Catalina, by the way.
Interesting. Really?
Yeah.
Right. Sort of sacred geometry and trigonometry at that matter. We're talking about...
Actually, not trigonometry. There's a recent Sumerian clay tablet that tells a lot more about their math. They followed the planet Jupiter through the sky using... a trapezoidal mathematics.
Interesting.
We use this trigonometry, which is three sides.
As opposed to
theirs
4 sides.
is 4 or more, which is probably really good in space when you think about it.
Actually, Nathan's got a question since he's live. Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, Dan, in your research with Stonehenge and Nazca and some of the other major areas, would you agree that these are pinpoint locations for ley lines?
They are vortexes, but it's actually a world power grid, and it has to do with electronics or electricity. And come to find out, it's all plasma based. And that's where John Hutchison comes in. But anyway, both Nazca and the Marfa Plateau are covered as a crystal cap. Okay? Now, when you add the fact of a very acidic aquifer or limestone aquifer, which is what it does to water, it acidifies it. You generate an electric current when you run it or run water that acidic through connecting points, and this can be found on YouTube by how to light a fire with a lemon. Okay, you can generate an electric current with lemon. All right, and when you think about these areas, they were lit up from underneath. And you, Nathan, you were the one who mentioned Mr. Hutchison can actually make the crystal glow. Well, this is how.
Correct.
Okay? Both Nazca and I believe Marfa, because there's never been any archaeological research done in Marfa, I believe that it has canals running beside the lines. And the reason I say this is because using the solstice paths that I'm talking about, I found an area in China where they apparently re-energized their ancient lines. They have unearthed canals beside the lines and ran water up it. And guess what happens? It turns into a plasma and continues on up the line without any water for hundreds and hundreds of miles. The whole thing is lit up. That tells me that Nazca and Marfa were also lit up. They were meant to be a navigational help on a dark planet.
Dark planet. Can you talk about, a little bit more what you meant about dark planet?
When the Anunnaki came here, there were no living things. They, according to the Sumerian chronicles, it says that they actually formed the earth, and I believe that now. I believe that we live in a created planet, terraformed, and I show actual terraforming out in Texas that are holding the areas of quartz crystal together. They are not reservoir or dams or anything like that. They are actual staples used like sutures are for doctors now. When you get a cut deep enough to have it sutured up.
Interesting. That's actually an interesting topic about the sutures. When I think of sutures, I think of the sutures on skulls too, not just for instance, being stitched up. And I hate to change that topic and bring it that direction, but you just triggered that in my head. You talked about giant skulls at the beginning of the show and even before we went on air. So why are the sutures different on there? And one explanation is they're not human. And obviously, I've seen skulls that were bound, to create the elongated skull, as opposed to ones that were natural. I actually have video of me. Richard Shaw, when him and L.A. Marzulli were in Peru, they went to a museum and found a mummy. Now, this is rare. For somebody to be able to convince a museum curator to take off the wraps of a mummy and let them handle it, that's unheard of. Why would you ruin a mummy? Why would someone allow that? But they did. And they were able to take casts. And so Richard Shaw made a replica, by, taking molds of it and then, of course, filling in the mold. Now, this was allegedly or dated to be, I think, 1,100 years or something around that range. And the age of this skull, the body, was 18 months. Now, in 18 months from a child's birth, right, or baby's birth, there is no way, even through binding, could you have such an elongation occur in just that short of time. And that's where I started to look at the sutures, because he had a regular skull sitting next to it for comparison. And I saw less sutures, natural sutures on the skull than on the giant. So what's your take on that, if you have one?
Yeah, well, actually, I saw that as they did it on video, and I was kind of surprised that they were allowed to do it anyway. But if you'll notice, the limbs of this baby are actually longer. Okay, they're spindly. This is one of the true Anunnaki. What bothers me is radiocarbon dating is not effective for anything from the present to 2,000 years. So when they radiocarbon date something in medieval range, you can't trust it. They've actually taken freshly dead things and radiocarbon dated them at thousands of years old. So
what do you think
just so you know.
What do you think of carbon dating as a way to check things? Because I think it's accurate when you're looking at now. But let me give you an example. For instance, if you had a time machine and you can go back to when I believe it was called Pangea, right? One continent and
one
surrounded
continent,
by the ocean. The climate was different. So how do we know that the half-life for carbon was the same at 3 billion years ago, 2 billion years ago? So wouldn't you expect that for that period for things to happen differently, to half-life to be different, so therefore something that old would have a half-life that is far maybe older or younger than, say, in the last 10,000 years?
Yeah, but radiocarbon dating is actually like burning things to get them down to a carbon, so that they can take their test from there. It really it's about as untrustworthy as the FBI doing hair follicle tests, which have recently been found that the FBI can't tell the difference between human and dog hair, and this counts for thousands and thousands of cases in the past too. When it comes to forensics, you're better off with the missed dates than you are with scientific dating. Genetic dating is about the only consistent
That's right.
way to date things.
Because it's genetic, exactly. And
right.
I tend to agree with that statement, very much so. And it's really hard for some reason to find, paternal DNA. And I've always been wondering that question. So, like, for instance, when Stephen Greer came across the Atacama humanoid, or when Elie Marzulli and Richard Shaw came across with all these different, skulls and bodies all around South America, a lot of them in Peru for some reason, they always are able to get the mitochondrial DNA, the maternal DNA, but never the paternal. I just thought that's interesting, a note to make. But nonetheless, Johnny Webb's got a question, so go ahead, Johnny.
This one comes in from Jean or Jean-Pierre in Lyon in France on Facebook. He asks, have you ever contacted the likes of Eric von Daniken or Graham Hancock on your Texas Nazca line work? What is the general consensus on the site?
I actually did contact Mr. Daniken a couple of times, and I asked him a simple question along with giving him all my information. Does he actually want to have the answers to things before he dies? And he never got back with me. And I have come to the conclusion that the lecture circuit crowd, or they're not as willing to share what they have. I could tell you that
for a fact. The reason is because it's their territory, and when someone new comes in, they feel that their share of the pool of money is going to get taken away from. So in order to break through, and I know this because I speak at events. So when I first broke through the speaking circuit, I'm not talking about the radio circuit, obviously there was that sort of jealousy amongst people. And I was like, hey, man, I'm not trying to take away from anybody. I'm just trying to bring something to the table. And finally, it became accepted that, okay, Dr. J is part of the circuit. And so, but I know what you're saying, Dan, because I saw that firsthand. Anyhow, Johnny, you have a follow-up on that? Johnny Webb.
Sorry, Doc. Sorry. At the moment, no, I'm quiet at the moment.
That's okay. I'm going to ask our caller, Nate, since he's been such a cool guy and staying on, if he's got anything he wants to say. Nathan, you still with us? Utah? Let me see if we lost him. Nope, he's still on. Area code 801, Nathan.
Sorry about that. I'm here. I had my phone on mute.
No problem, brother. Thanks for doing that, by the way. I appreciate that.
Another question to Dan. With Nazca and in that place, have you done any research on Mercury?
Yes, actually, the Great Pyramid at Tiwanaku has recently been found to sit over a pool of mercury. Okay,
Now,
and it is my thought, because each of these solstice lines connects exactly within inches from megalith to megalith to megalith, but on each of these solstice lines there is at least one pyramid. Now, I'm not the first researcher to say this, but pyramids are not energy producers. They're energy users. And this is backed up by anybody that goes in the Great Pyramid will find their batteries drained. Okay? And what's happening is in these pyramids, I believe they were used for refining and storage of gold. The reason that the megaliths are all connected, the shrines especially, are because of the difficulty transporting the weight of gold. They had to cross over a certain amount of things and deposit what they had somewhere, which was a pyramid, and that would be for refining. There are some pyramids that were more involved in the process, because I believe they were making monatomic gold. And monatomic gold has a couple of properties. It's anti-gravity, and it also cloaks. It turns invisible.
Not to mention, it's actually eaten. It's good for you, allegedly, right?
That's supposedly mana.
Yeah.
And I have no reason to doubt this. But just think, to a species that, according to their own chronicles, had a problem with their atmosphere and the radiation coming into their atmosphere, that they had to take this and shove gold up into their atmosphere.
Right.
Now, how would you do that? It would have to be done as a monatomic gold. It'd make it so much easier to transport.
I was going to say, on top of that, don't forget the conductivity. The electrical conductivity of gold is, I believe, 100%, and which makes it so good. And then this, Johnny's got a good question. I'm going to turn it to him in one quick second. Let me just say this quick statement. This begs the question, when you look into the past, say 3,000, 8,000 years ago, why did the ancient civilizations of humanity value gold so much? It really meant nothing to them, if you look at it, except the fact that their gods saw it to be valuable. So for that matter, they used it, because it wasn't like, oh, it's a shiny metal, let's just make things out of it. No, something had to influence them to say, this has value to them, therefore this has value to us. Because there's so much more that Mother Earth has to offer in times of antiquity that would have made other elements or other items to be much more valuable in their life.
Yeah, well, gold itself it's really not a good rock to use for hard materials, for knives, arrow
Swords,
points, or anything like that.
Like
that. And as a first people, blood brother, I got to say that we all say the same thing, and that the gold is the gods.
Correct.
And if you ask the Aztec, they'll tell you that exactly in those words.
And that's what I love about the Mayan and the Aztec culture. They have no questions or quells with saying the people from the heavens that came above, the gods from above, the sky watchers, or the sky people. That was the key word. The sky people told us this, brought us that. It's just all over the place. Anyhow, Johnny's been sitting on a question. Go ahead, Johnny.
Okay, well, this is a China first for us. It's Jung in Shanghai. He asks, what do you understand of our pyramids in China?
That they are a part of the solstice lines. And I have to think that they're also a part of the whole gold process. It was a worldwide dealing. Not just South Africa shows these ancient gold mines, but also South America has found 200,000-year-old gold mine down there. Everywhere around the world shows these subterranean tunnels that could not have been made by anyone present.
And let me throw this at you. When we had, as a matter of fact, Michael Cremo on, he talked about, this is a very startling fact because, it's not just a claim he made. This was tested, carbon dated. They found here in California, Los Angeles,
Table Mountain,
a cavern, that again was not man-made. It was man-made. Sorry, not natural. A mine, right? And in the sealed mine, they found human bones, larger than normal, so giant-sized. And guess how old they were carbon dated to be?
I don't know. I know about the Table Mountain find. 5
million years old. Now that blew me away because, according to the Anunnaki myths or stories, we weren't even created till 250,000 years ago. So that means a giant human-like race was here a lot longer if this is really to be corroborated.
And really, you find pieces of these giant skeletons everywhere. In Galveston,
yes.
In 1900, there still exists to this day one giant skeleton or skull there, and that was considered to be Atlantean when they found it.
For those who are listening abroad, that Galveston is in Texas. Just to make that clear. Of course, people in America. Nathan knows that, you know that, I know that, Tom knows that, but just for, the international people, they may not have known that. But back to these pyramids, they're all over the place, and I don't know what year it was, but they actually found in the waters, underwater off the coast of Japan, pyramids.
Oh.
So that begs the question of two things. First of all, were the ice caps or the ice age, was this built during the ice age when the seawater, the water level was lower, hence these pyramids were not underwater? And secondly, what were the Japanese doing building pyramids?
Well, as Mr. Bledsoe stated that he asked when he was abducted about that, and was told that the sea levels were about 165 feet lower. Now, the funny thing is, you were talking about how different it was in Pangaea, and we have one good source of information that cannot be disputed, and that's called amber. Okay, this was pictured in the Jurassic Park movies, where they got the DNA from the mosquito and made the dinosaur. Well, that's similar. Only they found that the Earth's atmosphere actually had a higher pressure millions of years ago, and the only way that could be is if, as in the Bible, water above and water below the firmament. This was one of the things that the Anunnaki were doing to try to help their own atmosphere. They were using this created, terraformed planet to test their own atmospheric devices. And this is where you get the Great Flood. When the Great Flood happened, basically the world was inundated. But now you don't have to worry about a water world. Even if the Arctic and the North Pole and the Antarctic both melted, and all the water in the atmosphere were to somehow drop down, the water level would only rise to about the chin of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, I've actually heard that. You know, it's ironic you mentioned that because since I was a child, I've always, daydreamed or even dreamt. One of the things I've always wanted to do was hope that I could somehow magically wave a wand or do something, make all the oceans disappear, and take some sort of rover and drive through the ocean beds, looking at all the shipwrecks, visiting the Titanic, picking up gold from 5,000-year-old, ships in the Mediterranean Sea. But anyway, I'm glad you mentioned that fact about if all the ice caps melted. Sure, we're going to lose land, quite a bit of it, but it's not going to flood the entire United States or all of Eurasia. Anyhow, we got another English question. Go ahead, Johnny.
It comes from Carly in Devon in England, and she on Facebook, and she wants to know what other megalithic sites and countries has Dan visited?
Oh, no. Actually, this was my first trek into even coming out publicly. The Dr. J, without the Dr. J show, I could not have the knowledge that I have now in order to make the discovery. This flies in the face of anybody saying synchronicity or nothing. Everything is random. There's no randomness in this universe. Everything is connected.
Correct. I've always believed that, and have you ever heard of the 7-second stare study?
No.
I don't recall the name of the person. I'm sure I could find it. This came around when we had a guest that was talking about that. But essentially, if you stare at someone for average time of 7 seconds, they're going to get that feeling that someone's watching me, and they're going to start looking around. Try it. Give it a shot. It's not going to work 100% of the time. It just depends on how receptive that person pineal gland is, or whatever they're getting. But you're sending something to them, and they're receiving something subconsciously that makes that feeling. You ever get that feeling that you're being watched? Well, that's kind of what it relates to. So anyhow, I wanted to mention that. Anyhow, we are running close out of time, so I want to give everyone an opportunity to see if they've got any last minute questions. So let me go. I'm going to start from the east, coming to the west. I'm going to ask Johnny first if he's got anything, and then I'll keep going west from there.
Yeah, hi Dan. Where do you think that this information can go to? What part in the big picture of the puzzle that we're all sort of looking at do you think this fits in with your findings and understandings?
It connects the dots. Anunnaki to Stonehenge, Stonehenge to the giants, giants to the pyramids. Everything is connected. All the megaliths are connected by solstice paths. And by the way, this is a good time for me to tell you that these solstice and equinox paths, they are like a flower of life symbol. And you can look this up online. It's sacred geometry. So when I say that there are vortexes, not ley lines, this is what I mean. It looks to me, and this might be the next book, is that these lines have actually two separate formations, one over the other, and it centers on the Great Pyramid, but it also centers on Catalina. It also centers in Santiago, Chile, Machu Picchu. Okay? There are vortexes everywhere. And if you look at the flower of life symbol, every single geometric feature can be found in it. You can make any geometric pattern if you have the flower of life. And the Orpheus stone in Greek, in the where they used to do the fortune telling for the Greeks, they had this thing called the Orpheus stone, which is a cosmic egg. Yes. Okay, or world egg, and they think that they actually say that life was brought to Earth in these stones, these eggs, but the pattern on this 10,000-year-old rocket minimum is the flower of life. Okay?
Johnny, go ahead.
Yeah, before I just hand it to the West Coast, my last question is, we get a lot of crop circles here, and today we even had one that's a crop circle with another alien head in it.
Today? Really?
Particularly in, looks like a grey, typical ET. And I just wondered what Dan's take is on the crop circle phenomenon.
They are telling us they are coming, if not already here. And NASA has already confirmed that, but they just haven't told us the right timing. And by the way, if you think about a monatomic atmosphere, it's going to make the planet almost invisible. So it's going to be real tough to find.
I'm actually looking at the crop circle for today, and as you mentioned, Johnny, wow, this is very intricate. It shows a typical gray alien head. It's in a circle, and it looks sort of either... the best thing I could describe it as is the wings of a fly are sort of surrounding it, except once it gets to right where the eyes are, it's blank from there on. It's you got to see it to understand it. But let me move on west, and then I'll circle back to Johnny for any final things. Tom, you have anything? If you're still on awake, Mr. Schaefer, got any questions? Okay, now let's move west. Nathan, anything you'd like to say before we go on? I know you're probably on mute, Nate. I'll give you a chance.
No, I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good.
no
Thank
problem.
you.
Well, then I will circle it back to me. I want to actually go back to the Marfa lights. And you flew over them in a plane, am I not mistaken?
A helicopter, yeah.
Helicopter. And did you see them? So you got to the point where you're right above them. Did you actually see them that they were moving further?
It was daylight.
And they were still there. That's the fantastic.
No. It's plasma. Plasma can't be seen in the daylight. Okay? And let me explain something about plasma. This absolutely has to do with crop circles too, Johnny. They're formed by plasma. And these people, the Anunnaki, know how to work with plasma electricity.
Light technology, yeah.
Now, the reason I say plasma is, and to validate it, you only have to look at the HARP machinery itself. It was invented and patented by a plasma physicist. Okay?
Yes.
And by that, you should know that plasma physics works. We've spent hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars on trying to find the God particle. Guess what? It doesn't exist. Because molecules are plasma.
That's right. It could very well be a smokescreen for the mainstream scientists, because just like that movie Lucky Number 11 said, the Kentucky Shuffle, or I believe that's what they called it, making a lot of noise to the left so you could act on the right, and it happens all the time. For instance, the movie Wag the Dog, what's it about? It's about a president who gets caught in a sex scandal right before his re-election, so they fake a war. So Hillary Clinton is, you have Loretta Lynch coming on and saying she's not filing charges. Then you have the FBI director, was it Casey, if I'm not mistaken, something along the lines of that, says all these things. Yeah, she was reckless with her email, this and that, and she shouldn't have had a server. There were confidential documents, classified documents that were sent through private accounts and through Gmail accounts rather than using the Department of State servers and accounts, and they were susceptible to hacking. And then he ends the statement with, she's not in trouble. And then right after that, what do you have to sort of take it away? Unfortunately, it's really sad, but then you have all these assassination of cops. You have the Turkey coup, which was failed. And I wouldn't be surprised if the CIA was involved, just like they were with basically all of the revolution in the Middle East, such as Gaddafi. And then you also have what happened in France, in Nice, and all that takes your attention away from what's happening here. But nonetheless, I'm sure it's going to keep asking. Back to London. Johnny, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, it's I'm trying to understand how to read it really, but he's saying it's Sing in London on Facebook, and he's asking Dan, God is the particle, is it the creator or the created?
It's the
and that's
universe.
How he said it.
Now, and I was going to mention that astronomers have now found way out in the darkest portions of the of their telescopic reach, that they found these galaxies. But guess what? They have 2 redshift signatures. So redshift is not a good measure for distance. But what they found was that galaxies actually exude or extrude a quasar or a couple of quasars. And they attached to them are these tethers of what they consider plasma. The galaxies are actually feeding the quasars plasma to a point where that quasar can push off and become its own galaxy. So guess what? We have a universe of consciousness, and it's very easy, a mathematical equation that you already know. It's called E equals mc squared. If you consider that E is God, in order for a mathematical equation to be correct, it has to be right no matter how you turn this around. So in order for energy, God, to create the universe, mass, it had to divide itself at the speed of light squared.
Agreed.
It's funny you say that.
Okay.
Sorry, Dr.
Everything is God.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Everything.
Yeah, you were talking about Albert Einstein's favorite line, but he also had a line that said, "There's no such thing as darkness. There is only the void of light." Would you make of that?
Right. And really, when you consider that gravity itself travels through all dimensions, it messes with time. It probably is a plasma itself, and it comes. This is a technology that we don't have a good hold on. But we're only taught 3 different forms of matter in school: solid, liquid, and gas. But there's a 4th form of matter, and that's plasma.
I have one final question here from a listener here. The question is essentially, it comes from Jordan in Maine. Are you aware of the 2 UFO researchers that have been killed? And if so, what do you think? And are you scared yourself?
Yes, I'm aware of it. No, I'm not afraid of death.
Gotcha. With that being said, I want to give you a chance to promote your stuff before we end the show. So give a final spiel about your website and your book, and we will end.
You will find me at Don Danel, DONDANL hyphen Dan Hoquist, DANHOQUIST. On Google+, you'll find me on Facebook. You will find me on YouTube, where I'm very, very active, and I'm doing a new series about the Marfa flight over the plateau, where I photographically validate everything and have a good time doing it. And I hope you all will check it out.
Absolutely.
By the way, there are tons of UFOs on there too. For anybody interested in UFOs, I just caught a triangle on the 12th, and I just caught one on the 18th that I haven't put out yet.
And go ahead.
Sorry,
Johnny.
Dr. J, I just wanted to finish on that, because the last caller there, what they're mentioning is very sort of, I've been following it closely, and the death of these 2 people, one is Max Spears, and I'd like to dedicate.
One who I knew, that's the one
I'd like to dedicate this show to Max Spears. He was an English super soldier who disclosed quite a lot of information, and my understanding is that he received an illness while he was in Poland, and a lot of black goo was coming out of him. Now, whether that's a sort of negative energy, or whether it's just sort of a bad blood clot or whatever. But it caused his death, and he's recently died. So,
I met him at the Super Soldier Conference 3 years ago, and I just, it's very sad, to know that him, and I don't know
the other guy. The other guy is an Indian gentleman who was very sort of forthcoming in India with supernatural experiences, ufology, and things like that. But it's interesting because not just 6 months ago, I think he was on TED, and he said
Talks,
that I have no way or intention of killing myself. So. He made that statement. So if I'm found dead,
he's killed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
well, everyone is worthy and everyone is cherished.
That's right.
And I know that they appreciate your care, Johnny.
And just like Johnny said, we'd like to dedicate this definitely to Max Spears and the other Indian gentleman. It's very sad, and especially when someone says, "I'm not going to kill myself, and if you find me dead, this is the reason why," and then they're found dead. So begs the question why. Phil Schneider said something similar, and then it was actually proven that his disabilities made it impossible for him to commit suicide the way he did. Nonetheless, it's been a fantastic 2 hours. I want to say, first of all, thank you to Dan the man. You've always been a great fan and a good caller and a fantastic researcher, and I can't wait to check out your book. I also want to thank the Dr. J Radio Live team. Of course, we got Tom Schaefer on the East Coast, who's always doing stuff behind the scenes, working hard and getting those archives out, taking care of the website, and even getting the imagery up during the show for people to see and toggling it, which is really cool. And of course, Johnny Webb, taking questions from the Europe and even further. Today we had some 2 new countries join the list, which this makes us literally, I've lost count, but we're definitely well over 40, probably close to 50 different countries we have received questions and callers from. So that's fantastic. And Johnny does a lot of work behind the scenes too. So don't everybody just discredit or say, oh, he's just a host on air, because behind the scenes, there's a lot that goes into the show. And then, of course, there's other people such as Louis Sheehan I want to thank, and, of course, the unnamed people on the Dr. J Radio Live team. The most important people I want to thank are you, the listeners. We wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for you listening to the show. And the reason why is if just one person is on the fence and opens their mind and starts to look at something, then we feel that everything is accomplished. Finally, I want to give thanks to Michael Vara and Ira Robinson for Late Night in the Midlands carrying our show, as well as Angel Espino from PSN Radio in, of course, New York, also carrying the show and syndicating it for us. And, of course, thanks to Johnny Webb, finding us a United Kingdom network, Deep Program Radio Network, JC. Thank him for airing us, and of course thanks Johnny for getting us set up there. And with that being said, don't forget you can catch the archive of this show once it's made on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Dr. J Radio Live. That is DRJ Radio Live. That is the same name as every single social media account, from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, Google+, as I said, Gmail, as I said, YouTube, our website, you name it, it's there. Pinterest, Slack, they're all there. And finally, I want to give one last person here who's going to say he's listening to Dr. J Radio Live, another guest who I hope you guys get a chance to listen to his interview on the archives. And that saying, I am Dr. J signing off.
Hi everyone, I'm Uri Geller, and guess what? You're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.